what I want to do today is talk about what I call the 100-year story. And this is part of my transition story, but it's also a lot of how GallantFew started and then GallantFew has transitioned. And this remains to be a problem. 20 years of war, and we still got the same thing going on. Transition's still broken. I talked with a master sergeant retiring out of the Joint Special Operations Command in the end of this year, and he didn't know anything about us. And when I asked him if he knew about one of the most valuable programs that the military has for transitioning veterans today, which is a 6-month paid internship with a company of their choice, he didn't know anything about it. How can they not know anything about this amazing benefit? So that stuff, the information flow is broken. And when you're on active duty, you're focused on being on active duty. You're not focused on transition. And when you're a professional on active duty, you focus on active duty until the day before you pack your bags. And now you've maybe not been exposed to all this other stuff. So that's where it's very important for us, members of other communities, to know that these things exist so we can help and engage when they come home. You know, I'm going to talk a little bit about this in my story, but the self-doubt, the low self-esteem, feelings of guilt and shame are very common among a lot of veterans who had a bad experience when they left. And if you did not retire from the military, you probably had a bad experience when you left. You either had a toxic leader, you got hurt, you made a mistake, something happened, you said, screw this, I'm out. And now, in some cases, you don't even want to talk about the reason that you got out. That can really cause a hiccup in your plan going forward. So
can I ask a question?
Steve.
I'm an outsider, so I don't know a lot about this.
Yeah.
You said there's a breakdown, and here you guys are, and many others across the country, trying to fill the gap from an informational standpoint. Where does it fall in the military? It seems like
it's not the military's job.
Not that their job to help train.
Their job is to break things and kill people so other countries comply with what we want. I mean, that's really the brutal reality of it. We don't want them to focus on taking a Ranger squad leader and making them a small business owner. We want that Ranger squad leader to become a Ranger platoon sergeant, right, and stay in. But the second that they decide, and this I think is the major problem with the transition program, because the military tries to run it. They need to turn it over to the VA. They need to turn it over to nonprofits and have just a clear, okay, you're transitioning, now they're gonna take over because we have to go fight the war, right?
Yeah, I caught a kid a couple of weeks ago who's transitioning out, and I asked him a few questions. He was there with his family, and he still had the 10-foot tall bulletproof. Couldn't hear a word. I said, we give you my number, introduce you to some people, you're getting ready to get out. And he goes, well, I'm gonna, and he dropped like 5 gunnas. And I'm like, I wish you the best, but until you are going to do more than gonna, until you're ready to start a conversation, you're gonna get stuck. He goes, I'll be fine. And I'm like,
I'll show you.
What to do with that?
I'll show you in this presentation how you can address that and how you can connect them to us.
It was disturbing. Kids getting out and zero plan.
Yeah, the young ones that get out 5, 6, 7 years, they're so bitter about getting out that they
don't start passing those quite yet.
Yeah.
Ones that get out after 20 or 25, they're so institutionalized that they don't think they need anything.
Yes.
Well, in the transition program, being taught by people who haven't transitioned, for the most part, they pump up that person on how great life is going to be after the military. Companies are going to love you. Don't start passing those yet. Hang on to them. That life will be easy on the outside. And then when it's not, then that turns into a whole nother thing that I think I talk about here in a minute. So anyway, back to the story, 100 years in the making. The tall gentleman in the very back of that group is my grandmother's brother, my great uncle, Roy Jones. Roy was, go ahead and go, oh, I got this slide, let me do this. So now you can pass those.
Sorry.
Roy was drafted and went into the Army and served in World War I. I'm passing around his dog tags and the compass that he carried when he was in the Meuse Argonne in France. Roy was, I didn't put his birthday on there, I think. Anyway, Roy and I had the same birthday, June 1st. He was born in the 1800s, so a few years before me. And yeah, you see him up here, he's up in the very top left there, that's pre-deployment, and then in the bottom, number 114, that's him post-deployment. And he went from being drafted to being a corporal and a squad leader. The ranks and the jobs back then were, now that would be a staff sergeant, but the ranks and those things were a little bit different back then. So anyway, the bloodiest battle in American history, and when he passed away, I inherited his basically unit history because he was one of the last survivors. So all of this stuff got passed down, which I scanned a lot of it, and then I turned it over to the Musargon National American Cemetery in France. Uncle Roy never talked about any of his experiences. He was a very private individual. He managed a ranch in a rural area, Kansas. Yeah, try and navigate with that guy, right? And he never really talked about his military experiences until I came back on leave from the Army as an infantry officer. This is me, the top right picture, that's my earliest experience with a weapon. And my father, who ultimately retired as a sergeant major, at that time, I think he was an E4 or an E5, and I guess you could just bring a BAR home, so he did. And we kept it over the weekend. I got my first modeling shoot. Later on, the black and white picture bottom center is my company command photo when I commanded B Company 514 Infantry in the 25th Infantry Division in Hawaii. And then the photo top left there is, that's at the Jungle Operations Training Center at Fort Sheridan, Panama, where I was with the 1st Ranger Battalion. We were going through the Jungle Warfare School there. So we would always have these family get-togethers. And my Uncle Roy would come into town, and I know I was in the Army here, and this might have been the time that he and I talked, because I have really short hair, and I've got my daughter, I think, is way back in the back center, or one of the kids is back there. So anyway, I can kind of date the timing. I was in the Army when this picture was taken. And my Uncle Roy there, tallest guy in the back right. And my grandmother is kind of over his left shoulder, leaning her head in, the gray-haired lady there. So he never talked about any of his wartime experiences until one day, he and I, after one of these family get-togethers, when I'm home on leave, it's just he and I sitting together on the back porch of my grandmother's house. And he starts talking about being under fire. He starts talking about being a squad leader. He talks about sending one of his patrols, giving his .45 pistol to a patrol leader, sending them on a patrol and watching them both die at the end of the ridge line. And he said his biggest regret was he lost his pistol. But this is nearby the Musargon. This is a part of Verdun in France where they have not improved the ground. They just kind of left it like it was. But he talked about being under mortar fire and how one of his buddies was hit, and he, between the mortar rounds, crawled over, grabbed the guy, and drug him into the shell hole. And I said, that's absolutely an amazing story. Were you decorated for bravery? And he was almost like I'd slapped him in the face. He was like, no, I didn't do anything brave. You know, I was just trying to keep my guys and me alive. In some of the material that I inherited from him later was a unit history that was written out in a book format. And you can tell this shaky old man, I don't know if he did it or one of his comrades did it, but it talks about Doughboy dying in the hole that his own hands had dug. And it was impressionable enough to them that of everything in that entire book, that's the only thing that they underlined. So I'm trying to remember if so the next day after that conversation that I had with him, I'm standing with my grandmother at the house. Everybody else is gone. I hadn't come back off of leave yet. And I'm helping her dry dishes or something. And I said, oh, Uncle Roy yesterday was telling me about that time that he was under fire and he drug his buddy into the hole, and she dropped the plate that she was holding, and she was like, what? He did what? What happened? Because he had never told anybody else the story. But he felt like, because now I'm an infantryman and I'm a veteran, that we have more of a kinship even than the fact that he's my great uncle and we shared the same birthday. Right now he feels like he can talk to me more than anybody else in the family. My own experience My combat experience was not combat experience. It was a 2-week show force deployment into Kuwait. That picture on the bottom right there, one of the Rangers that jumped in with us at dusk was carrying a camera, so we got a picture of coming into Ali Al Salem Airfield in 1991. And bottom center there, at that time I was the S1, those were my steely-eyed personnel specialists, one JAG guy, one payroll guy, one promotion guy, one awards guy, and me. And then that picture there on the top left, that's the S3 section, that's the operations and training section, and I was the assistant operations and training officer my last year, a little over a year there. If you look at the far right there, Joe Votel is the one kind of standing all the way on that end by himself. Joe ultimately retired as a 4-star general. I'll talk more about him in a minute. On his right shoulder is a guy named Burleson. Burleson is right now 2-star general on active duty. The guy that is, and then I'm right there in front of Burleson. The guy to my right is a guy named Odom. Odom, I think, just got promoted to 3 stars. There's another one in there someplace. Let's see. I don't see him right now, but there's another officer in there named Bonner that is now 2-star general. So there are no other units in the military of that size that produce those kind of leaders. And I say that because I served with some absolutely amazing, amazing people. This is the silver. Dang it. I looked at his picture a minute ago and I did it again. This is a silver bracelet that I wear. And I said it doesn't make me depressed, it makes me sad because he was the general officer caliber of those other guys. And he and another Ranger Battalion commander and an Air Force Special Tactics Squadron commander, total of 12, died on a helicopter in the Great Salt Lake just off of Antelope Island. And that memorial there has a picture of all of them. Beautiful place to visit when the weather isn't horrible. But we were rehearsing a real world mission that I found out years later was to go overseas and either grab some very important bad person or some evidence of stuff that very important bad person was doing. All of that ended with that helicopter crash. Those colonels that died on that bird, they were the Petraeuses, they were the McChrystals, they were, if we'd come back with whatever it was we were supposed to get, the terrorist attacks might have never happened. And what's crazy about going down that rabbit hole is that can take me to a very dark place, right? So I choose not to go there because now we have to focus on what can we learn from all of this and what can we do going forward. But I think it's important that everybody understand why, I think it doesn't just impact me, that death, I think it impacts all of you, and you didn't know it maybe until now. My future changed in that instant of that helicopter crash because the guy that died, Ken Staus, had promised me command of a Ranger company. As an infantry officer in the Army, there is no better job than commanding a Ranger company unless you're maybe commanding a Ranger battalion. And the interim battalion commander that came in, a guy named Mick Bednarik, who retired as a 3-star general, Mick promised me that company also. They both did it in my evaluation report in writing. Ranger Regiment's an interesting place because you can't be a battalion commander in a Ranger battalion unless you've been a successful battalion commander in the big Army first. Can't be a company commander there unless you're a successful company commander in big Army first. So they want to make sure that they're putting people in there that know what they're doing. So Mick had not commanded a regular infantry company before, or battalion before. He ultimately came back later and commanded 2nd Ranger Battalion, but he couldn't stay there. So he did 4 months and then the permanent guy came in. And the permanent guy is a very capable, qualified officer. He's actually in the Ranger Hall of Fame at Fort Benning, Georgia, but he and I just didn't get along. And after about 4 or 5 months of him being there, he called me in his office and he said, "Yeah, I know you're supposed to take command of this company here in about 3 weeks, but I'm going to give it to this other guy." And I said, "Okay." "Yes, sir." "So what am I going to do now?" And I made a series of decisions based on emotion and got out of the Army. I was out of the Army before that change of command happened. And the officer that took that company, hey, come on in. The officer that took that company ultimately made it to 2-star general. And the week before he was supposed to retire, he collapsed and had a heart attack and died on a run. And he was very instrumental in helping build the Joint Special Operations capabilities that the country has today. So anyway, Jeff Bannister is his name. So my future changed. I had a bad experience with the Army. I'm getting out. I'm going to go home to Wichita, Kansas, because I want my kids to know their grandparents, their great-grandparents, the family. Because when you're in the Army, especially when you're in a Ranger Battalion, you're never home. And you can't, you're stationed somewhere where your kids don't get to know family. So I wanted to go there. So I first reached out to a recruiter, military recruiter, and they said, oh, wow, you're a captain, you got top secret clearance, you coming out of Ranger Battalion, we'll get you, this is 1993, we'll get you a $100,000 job in a month. Here's the deal. We set up the interview, you go, if they offer you the job, you have to take it. And I said, that's perfect as long as it's within a 4-hour drive of Wichita, Kansas. And they said, it doesn't work that way. And I said, I've been in a Ranger Battalion for 3 years. They told me where to go and what to do, and you're not going to do that. So I'm going to go to Wichita. I'm a Ranger captain with a top secret clearance. I'm going to get a great job. This was my job interview with one of the largest oil and gas privately held companies that's based in Wichita, Kansas. I won't say the name of the company, but you can probably figure it out. And their human resource director looked at me across the table, looked down at my resume, and she said, you Army officers are real good at following orders and doing what you're told, but here at this company, we need people that have initiative, think outside the box, and don't need constant supervision. And that's probably word for word what's on that slide, because it was like burned into my brain when she said it. What do you say to that? You pick up your stuff and you leave, right? Because my first thought was, well, you people are so ignorant, you'll be out of business in a year. Didn't work that way. But no, I didn't go to work there. So then what happens? Now you start panicking and you start trying to think, well, my starter wife didn't have a college degree. My kids were young, I need health insurance. I don't have a retirement. I got to start figuring out what to do. So as I'm back in Wichita, Kansas now, trying to find a job, trying to get set, trying to figure out which end is up, Somalia happens. 3rd Ranger Battalion. Guys that I knew, guys that I trained with, now they're getting torn up in Somalia. And I'm thinking, should I have stayed? Should I have swallowed my pride and said, okay, if I can't be a Ranger Company commander, what can I do? And then maybe I could have impacted that. Again, that'll take you right down that spiral, right? It's all the woulda, coulda, shoulda, and that's not healthy for transition. But so I'm going through all of this, but that bottom line there is super important, because is there any chance I'm going to sit down with somebody after I just got out of the Army, back home in Wichita, Kansas, and say, let me tell you about what's going on in my head. Let me tell you why my heart hurts so much. You can't do it. So you don't talk to anybody about it. And in cases like with Mylan, you don't talk to anybody about it for 40 years after you get back from Vietnam. And that can, while on the outside you may look super, super successful, on the inside there's all kinds of stuff that can really mess you up. I didn't even want to tell people I was a Ranger. Because if I saw old high school buddy back in Kansas, hey, I heard you went in the Army. What'd you do in the Army? Oh, you were a Ranger? How come you're not doing that anymore? Because 12 of my friends died. Then you have to go into the whole, I didn't get the job that I wanted, and it takes you in a bad place. So you go from having the ultimate purpose, support and defend the Constitution, serve the best unit in the military anywhere, and now I can't even get a job. How do you deal with that? That's Joe Votel's uniform. Remember I showed you that guy that was in the back right corner? He led the Rangers into Afghanistan on 9/11. He was the Ranger Regimental Commander. And he and another guy named Jeff Bannock, who I trained in to replace me as the personnel officer of the battalion, led the 3rd Ranger Battalion in. So now Joe's uniform is in the Ranger Hall of Fame, or in the National Infantry Museum, and that's a picture of them. They're jumping into Afghanistan. And you think I had, when 9/11 happened, you think I had any regrets about getting out of the Army 8 years earlier? So my reaction to 9/11 was similar to, when I left the military. I didn't want to talk to people about it. I felt tremendous pride for my Ranger brothers that had jumped in, and for everybody else that was responding. But what could I do now? I'd had back surgery, I'm fat, I'm getting old, I can't run anymore. I can't go sign up and go do something. I actually talked to my wife about, should I go back in, maybe I can train, or do something, but I'm trying to figure out what am I going to do. But man, everything, it just really sucks. But I had sent an email to Joe because I was still in the Army Reserve system, even though I was inactive. And so I shot an email to joseph.votel@us.army.mil, and it got him. And he answered me 3 days later. He was still in Afghanistan. And I told him, you know, I was proud, I was jealous. Please pass along the thanks of our nation to everybody that was there. Well, when he responded, he thanked me for writing him, and he invited me to come to his change of command in 2003, which is called Ranger Rendezvous. Getting ready to have one here at the end of July. Ranger Rendezvous is an every other year Ranger party at Fort Benning, Georgia, where old guys, young guys, now there are women, so they're young women, that all converge on Fort Benning to tell lies and have fun with each other. And I got to be friends with some of the Rangers that climbed Point de Hoc by going to Ranger Rendezvous when I was on active duty. So, but I hadn't participated since I got out because I really didn't feel like I fit in anymore, because this one battalion commander had taken away my dream job, and then I got my feelings hurt and I quit. So what part do I belong with that now? But now Joe's invited me, so I'm going because Joe invited me. That's Joe and me, bottom right. I know, like you said, nobody ever ages, right? That's proof that nobody ever ages. So I get there, and my plan is to walk up to the back of the bleachers. And some of you have heard me tell this story before. And I'm just going to blend into the crowd. I'm going to watch, get some pictures, and then I'm going to leave. Because I don't want, you know, somebody's going to see me there. What are they going to say? Oh, why are you here? There's a young Ranger standing there with a clipboard, and he says, "Sir, what's your name?" And I said, "I'm not on that list. I'm just going to go over." And then he interrupts me. He's like, "Sir, what's your name?" And I told him my name, and he goes, "Follow me." And he took me dead front center of the bleachers, where all the VIPs were, all the general officers he had a seat with my name on it right there in the front with everybody else. And I was like the last one to get there because I was sneaking up in the back. After the change of command, he came over to me, gave me a hug, and I got a picture with him, but I can't find it now. And it was one of the most healing experiences from my military service that you could have, because you know, talk about a true leader and what a real leader does. A real leader recognizes how they can heal somebody else, and he did it just like that. It was amazing. So, but guess what happened? He lit a fire under me, because now I'm going to come back and I'm going to help other people like me that are going through what I went through, because I had this epiphany that I needed to be accepted, and I got accepted and was like, I'm healed. So I want other people to feel that too. So I'm trying to figure out how to do that, but I can't get anybody to get off the stick. I can't get the VA to do anything. I can't get Fort Riley to do anything. So I just start doing it on my own. So I went and set up a LinkedIn networking group for Rangers in 2003. And I started, any Ranger I had an email address to, I spammed the hell out of them. And they started joining this group. And as they joined, I started, I called each one and I verified they were, if I didn't already know them, I verified who they were. You know, who's your squad leader, what was your Ranger class number? And I had some people that were not legitimate that got cast to the side. But we had, over the next 6 years, we developed that group into 1,000 Rangers. And that became the genesis of what today's nonprofit GallantFew is. That picture there is beautiful, isn't it? That's Point de Hoc. That's the 75th anniversary of D-Day, and that's two active duty Rangers, but one's wearing the World War II uniform and one's wearing a current uniform. And the World War II guy is helping the young guy up the cliff. Is that what we do? That's exactly what we do. So GallantFew started as a 501c3 in 2010, and it encompasses really this basic philosophy. If you don't know where you're going, you're going to end up someplace else. It's a Yogi Berra quote, right? So when I left active duty, I didn't know what I wanted to be. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had no clue, and I didn't investigate it because I was desperate to get a job. I didn't care what my job was as long as it paid me. Well, that didn't work out so well for me in the first job that I had, because I wanted it to be like the team that I left, and it wasn't. And it was incredibly, incredibly frustrating. Hey, PK. So that's one of the things that's really interesting is the compass connection. So inheriting that compass was pretty special, but it got me thinking about what does a compass do? Compass keeps you on azimuth, right? So this is not the one that I carried on active duty, but it's exactly like it. That is my real Ranger pace count. But many of you know how this works, right? At night, especially, if somebody tells you, we need you a mile over there because you got to attack an objective, well, now you got to figure out how you're going to get through the woods and the creeks and streams and stuff. So you get your map out, and like an airliner does now, they may fly from this city kind of over this waypoint, and then they go to that waypoint, so that they don't necessarily stay on one azimuth the entire time, but they have a series of azimuths. So you do the same thing with your map. You figure out, I want to go to this point, check, verify where I am, then I'm going to go to this point, check that, and then this is my objective. And as you dial in those azimuths on here, you keep this, the north-seeking arrow has a little glow-in-the-dark line on it, and the bezel has a glow-in-the-dark line on it. So you line the two of those up, and then as you walk, you're not looking at what's in front of you, you're trying to make sure that this thing kind of stays the direction that you want to go. And what happens when you start walking like that? What's the first thing you run into? Well, yeah. Trees, right? And spider webs, and then you fall down into a creek, and then there's a boulder there. And how do you stay on your azimuth when these things keep getting in your way? Especially, I love the spider web thing, because if you've ever done the spider web dance, after you're done figuring out if you had a spider on you or not, you don't even know where you are. You got to figure out everything again. So you can go ahead and pass that around. But that staying on azimuth is important. What happens when you leave the military? You get an azimuth from this transition training that they give you that tells you here's how to write your resume, here's how to talk in an interview, here's places to go find jobs, and then you get an interview like I had. That was a big tree I just walked into, and I had to figure out how to go around that tree. The VA doesn't get you in for care in a timely fashion. That now you just walked into a big rock, you got to go around that. You can't sleep at night, so you drink. You just fell down into a stream. Now, all of these things are taking you off this transition azimuth. And the longer that you stay off of that azimuth, the farther away you're going to get from your objective. But if you didn't start out knowing where your objective was in the first place, right? So you see where you're going. You don't know where you're going, you don't know how to get there, and you're just floundering. So what GallantFew does, and Tommy, what you talked about earlier, this is where that guy needs to go. The GallantFew azimuth check. The GallantFew azimuth check is a 25 statement self-assessment that has you rate yourself from 1 to 10 on statements such as, I believe life is worth living. 1's not at all, 10's a whole bunch. Facebook stresses me out, 1 to 10. When you're running for office, it could be like an 8 or a 9, right? 30. A 30? Yeah. One of the questions is, I feel thankful for my life. One of the questions is, I have a budget and I follow it. I have a group of workout buddies and we meet frequently. So when you've done this 1 to 10 assessment, now we have an overall, this person may be a 7 out of 10, but now we can go into each area. So physically, socially, professionally, emotionally, spiritually, where are they there? Spiritually, they might be a 3 out of 10, but physically they're a 9 out of 10. So why do we need to talk to them about working out if we need to focus on the spiritual side? So this gives it's like an azimuth check. It's a map check. It's where are you right now? Then you have to go to the next step. Now, where do you want to be? What do you want to be next? What do you see your relationships looking like in a perfect world? What do you see your career looking like? And then once you have that, now you can start charting a true path to get there. And if you return and do the GallantFew azimuth check periodically, you can check yourself to see if you're staying on track. Some of the observations, these are like, most everybody in the military goes through something like this. The first one is you hide injuries. Especially if you're in a job where you're expected to be a leader, you don't go around complaining that you have a headache or that your back hurts or something else. You suck it up and you go lead them to do what you need to do.
I had been pregnant.
You had been pregnant. Wow. And
you can't hide that after a while.
Yeah.
I'm just letting everybody know.
Because what happens is then you might not get to do the job that you love to do. And in the case of having an injury that's not a pregnancy, that maybe the military, you could say the military screwed you over, but that would be a whole funny joke, wouldn't it? But I'm not going to go there. But you hurt your back, you hurt your back on a jump, right? But you want to continue being in an airborne unit so you don't tell anybody that you hurt your back. The medical record doesn't exist for that injury. The VA doesn't recognize it as an injury. So then 10 years down the road, in my case, after I was out of the military for 14 years, I had to have total right hip replacement. My hip bothered me the entire time. I couldn't sit like that while I was on active duty because of my right hip. And the VA's like, it's not our problem. Those night parachute jumps you did, that had nothing to do with it. The other thing that happens is you avoid mental health for the same reason, right? You don't want to tell somebody that you might be struggling with something for fear that you won't be able to do that job. So you self-medicate, you get angry, you break relationships and make bad decisions. All of these things, you can function on active duty because you have that purpose. You know what you got to do. You may be destroying relationships, but you know what you got to do, right? When you don't know what you have to do anymore and you're off active duty, all those other things still exist, but now you don't have that sense of purpose that can help kind of keep you going, right? So there's a couple of things that have to happen. And
the one I don't see on there that was mine when I got out was a lack of commitment from civilians. Like they'd go in and screw around at work, call it work day and go about it. I'm just wanting to light them all on fire. I'm like,
yeah.
What's your plan? I mean, why are you even here? That was my biggest battle getting out, was people just didn't seem to care about their work.
That is a huge thing, and it's one that I dropped out of this slide because of just timing. I didn't want to spend too much time talking about it. When I left the military, my first job was as the safety and training director for a 7-Up bottler that covered half of Colorado and most of Kansas. And I couldn't get them to wear their safety glasses in the pressurization room, right? They nicknamed me Deputy Dog because I kept going in there and telling them I would get them fired if they didn't wear their safety glasses. Until 6 months later, this little Vietnamese guy comes into me and he shows me his safety glasses, and there's a great big piece of glass stuck in it because one of the bottles had exploded, and he thanked me for saving his eyes. But yeah, they didn't care. They didn't care. They didn't think it was important. And they didn't care if I told them to do it, and I just came from a Ranger battalion, and I'm going to kill everybody because you're not doing what I'm saying. Anyway, so when you look down there, your self-esteem plummets. You look around, you see other people doing that kind of stuff, it damages your self-esteem, and in worst case, you believe that you're not worthy of love. All of these things here that I talk about are, in the military, you talk about lessons learned, right? You do an after-action review, you get a list of lessons learned. Good leaders don't say, you did that horribly. They say, here's what you did, how can we do it better, right? So how do we help other veterans navigate this transition thing? That first one is, those lessons learned, you got to share them. You have to say, like in my case, PK's sharing lessons learned right and left, Mylan's doing it, Jim's done it. There's something in your life that maybe you were ashamed of. Chad did it here a couple of weeks ago. And you don't want to tell anybody about it, but it's important for them to know because it can help them either heal or not make that same mistake. And now you've created purpose for yourself because you're sharing that information that's very personal, but you're helping somebody else. And helping somebody else and serving somebody else is what it's all about. We have to do more of that. I believe the bond of the warrior is essential for credibility. Kelly didn't serve in the military. So we all love Kelly to death, and we want to help and do everything that we can for her. But if Kelly walks up to a veteran and says, you need to pull your head out of your butt, is that veteran going to respect that like another veteran if that veteran walked up to them and said, you need to pull your head out of your butt, right? So that warrior bond is essential for accountability and credibility. The azimuth check, we got to start with that. Any of you are welcome to take it. We encourage anyone to take it. So feel free to take the azimuth check. It's unfortunate that in recent political climate, the word patriot has gotten a little bruised because we call anyone who loves their country a patriot. Anybody who wants to help veterans, they're a patriot. And so veterans can take the azimuth check, active duty can take the azimuth check, and patriots can take the azimuth check. If you're not a veteran, if you're not military, we're not going to spend a lot of time going over your azimuth check with you. But you're going to get results back that you can use to self-assess and a link so that you can dig further into resources that are out there for you. If you're a veteran, then we say, okay, so your spiritual fitness level is a 3 out of 10. Are you satisfied with that? Are you happy with how your level of spiritual fitness is in your life. And if they say no, then we say, would you like us to help you put together a plan to be more gallant? And then we talk about how do you increase your spiritual fitness, or emotional fitness, or physical fitness, or whatever that is. But they have to direct it, right? So if your spiritual life is where you want it to be, what does it look like? Now, what do we have to do to move from this point to that? Defining your objective is huge, because you can't move to that point if you don't know what that objective is. And we talk objectives, we don't talk goals. Because does anybody in the military ever attack a goal? No. To me, a goal is something that I didn't make that goal. But if I miss the objective, that's a career killer. So objective to me is timeline, resources, right? That means you really got to commit to it. So that's what we talk about, objectives. The VA refers to veterans or defines veterans based on a disability. The VA defines veterans based on disability. I believe we define veterans based on ability. And we want to help them identify that ability and move them that direction. I talked to a kid. This is a typical event that happens for veterans, sponsored by the VA, sponsored by a coalition in Kansas that put together this drive-through veteran resource fair. They touted it as a huge success. Afterwards, there were probably 50 or 60 cars that drove through. Most of the ones that were driving through, in my opinion, were there because they were getting a free sack lunch at the end of it. And there were no services that anybody was offering that any of these veterans, I mean, they were all in the system already, you could tell because they were wearing VFW hats, and except for one young veteran that came through, and his wife is driving, he's in the passenger seat, and he's got like a 2 or 3-year-old kid in a car seat in the back. And the car is kind of beat up, and it's got a bunch of garbage and stuff on the inside of it. And I leaned down and I said hi to him, gave him my card, and I said, hey veteran, what do you do? And he said, I'm 100% disabled. And he's probably 25, 26. And I said, yeah, but what do you do? And he just looked at me like, well, what do you mean, what do you do? And I wanted to say, your kid's gonna grow up and leave, so being a dad forever is not gonna happen. If all you are is disabled veteran, how does your wife perceive you? What's your self-esteem like? How do you have purpose and meaning in defining yourself as being 100% disabled? That is, and he hasn't reached out to me because I'm like, let's talk. I want you to do the azimuth check. Let's see what opportunity we can find out there. And I haven't heard from him yet. But there are events and organizations out there that will do something, and they count it as a success because they had 50 people that showed up. I count it as a success if you're able to identify that 1 or 2 or 10 people that really need help and you get them moved the right direction. And by and large, our system for helping veterans does not do that. And we need more organizations to do that. GallantFew tools, I think I talked about most of that stuff. I'm not going to go through all of it, except I am going to mention Brigade V and Vet Expo and Vet Rec. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a couple of them. So the first one is GallantFew Star Coaching. Functional emotional fitness is a process. We're certified by the Burris Institute in Los Angeles to provide this. It's a very set, coached piece. I could take one of you that's never seen the content, and if you can read like you're reading a story to somebody, you could coach someone through this process. It's clunky and it's not enjoyable when you do it that way, but I could. But what we do is we identify some veterans that are able to be teachers and coaches and mentors, and Chad's on the list to get this training soon, and we take them through this process where they learn how to present the material. And you learn how to ask veterans, what's one area in your life that you absolutely must accomplish in the area of love? And when I say that, you may get something that flashes in your mind. It might be a relationship, it might be faith, it might be, who knows. But something pops into your mind, and then we ask, what questions do you ask about that? Right, so the one thing that I have to do in my area of my life is improve my relationship with my wife, let's say. So if I say, what's one question you ask about that? My question might be, why can't I have more patience with her? Right, why can't I be a better father or better husband, or why can't I do this or that? And how do you answer a why question? Every why question starts with the same word when you answer it. What? Because. There you go, because. Why is the sky blue? Well, because the light and the clouds and whatever. Why can't I control my anger? Because I have PTSD. So that means I can't control my anger because I have this condition that makes it so. It's not reality, right? So we need to shift that to, what do I need to do to control my anger? That initiates a different set of thought process in your head that's problem solving. And if you say, what does your life look like when your anger is under control? That gives you the vision. That's where you want to go. And then you set the path from here to there. That's what the GallantFew Star Coaching is all about, learning how to implement that in your daily life.
So STAR, what's the
STAR stands for self-training and responsibility. Self-training, because I can't make you do it. I can give you some coaching, but you've got to train daily on how to do it. And responsibility means you have the ability to choose your response. So I can take a shot of whiskey or I can drink my coffee. Doesn't matter if I was beaten when I was 3, I can still have those choices. Vet Expo's coming in October. We've got speakers lined up for it. It's going to happen at Cinnamon Creek Ranch. It is the 8th and 9th of October, so just kind of keep that on your radar, because I want you all to come out. I'd love to have anybody that wants to volunteer and help put it together. I could use all the help in the world pulling that together. I'm working on Doug Dunbar being our MC this year. So he lives in Keller, and he's a Gold Star son, and he likes what we do.
Now, Bravo Zulu on all the work you've done on all that already, that's amazing.
Vet Rec is veteran outdoor, it's really relationship building and connection. And the key component of Vet Rec is our veteran climbing program. When we get done here and I get this stuff packed up, I'm heading to Summit Climbing Gym, where there'll be a couple other veterans that show today. Zach's not going to be there because he's out of town. But we usually have anywhere between 4 and as many recently we've had, I think, 15 that showed up. And I'm out of time, so I won't say very much more about it. But the big thing about climbing is, when you leave the military, what's the first thing you stop doing? Working out. You don't have to go to PT formation anymore. Well, if we say every Tuesday and Thursday at 4:30 at Summit Gym, veteran climbing, there's PT formation, there's a workout, there's accountability, people are waiting for you to show up if you say you're going to be there. And it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter what shape you are, you can participate. The second thing that happens, and I talked about that earlier, is you start losing some self-esteem. Your self-image starts going down as your physical fitness decreases, right? And what's one thing that you have in the military that, unless you're a first responder, you don't have as a civilian? Not counting being a parent. You don't have responsibility for somebody else's life. And other people don't have responsibility for your life, right? What happens when you climb? You get on the end of the rope, you better trust that other person with your life. And when they're climbing, they better trust you with their life. It's now you have responsibility for something greater than yourself in a very physical way. So the climbing environment is super good for helping build self-esteem and trust and confidence back up in veterans. Brigade V is an initiative that we started almost a year and a half ago that is a monthly conference call. The next one is this Thursday, of people that belong to corporations that have resource groups focused on veterans. So Charles Schwab, for instance, has, I forget if they call it their military resource group or their business resource group for veterans, but it's focused on people that want to help support veterans, our veterans, right? So they participate in internal things at Schwab. They do Memorial Day videos, and they do Veterans Day things, and they pack bags to send overseas. And American Airlines has one, AT&T has one, Verizon has one. Virtually every company that's out there has a resource group like this. Some of them do really, really good stuff, and some of them don't even know how to get off the ground. And so we formed Brigade V as an association of people that belong to all of those groups. So they get on a conference call once a month right now, and they talk about best practices, lessons learned, onboarding veterans, supporting veteran employees, patriots that want to help veterans, what kinds of things can they do? And when you share something that State Farm does with American Airlines and they can put it into their group, what have we done? We've helped, again, raise the bar across the board. Vet Expo, second half of the day, that Saturday afternoon, is going to be a Brigade V Association mini conference. So I'll have about 3 hours where they can get together and they can talk about where they want the organization to go. Because it's not my organization. We're going to keep kicking it until we actually give birth to it. but it's not ours. Patriot Challenge that I hope that everyone in this room participates in. I was embarrassed yesterday when I talked to, and I want to say Debbie, is that right, from the Help Our Wounded Military?
Yeah, it was.
So I'm on the phone with her, and I'm talking to her like I've never met her before. And she says, well, I did Patriot Challenge. I was on Kelly's team. And I'm like, oh, I should know that. But I mean, what a great example, right? She's on the board of directors of this organization that raises money, but not for GallantFew, but she's doing Patriot Challenge, which raises money for GallantFew. So then I said, well, how come Help Our Wounded Military didn't do the 50-50? Because you can get half of the money back that your team raises. Now, I don't want Kelly's team to raise money for them, but she could, right? So there's ways there to help lift up other organizations like that. But Patriot Challenge happens every February. Registration will be open in October, and I will remind you about it when we get closer to it. Very quickly here, I'm almost done. 2020 was a bad year in terms of money for us. We were down $125,000 over 2019. Part of that was we birthed out the Raider Project. It became its own nonprofit, which we were very proud of. It was time for them to grow up and do their own thing. So that took a chunk of our income, but it also took a chunk of expenses. We did, on about $650,000, we helped almost 900 veterans with about 2,100 services. And a lot of those services were that functional emotional fitness or the STAR coaching that I talked about earlier. A lot of those services were climbing events and those kinds of things. We have huge impact. We had audited financials. We'll put our overhead cost up against anybody, and especially considering that there's only 4 of us with a couple of contractors that are doing all that stuff. So what can you do? Send veterans to the GallantFew Azimuth Check. I mean, if you think about the number one impact you could have, any veteran or a patriot for that matter, send them and have them go do the Azimuth Check, because now they're in our system and we can shoot them information and we can try and include them in things. Talk about Brigade V. If you know somebody that works at a company, their company needs to have somebody talking to Brigade V. It doesn't matter if there's 10 people that work at the company and their veteran resource group is 1, we can still help that one person help their company be more veteran friendly. And do Vet Expo and Patriot Challenge. I don't want to wait another 100 years to fix veteran transition, right? Let's go through it now. So I've got a little rest of the story, if you don't mind me talking for another 5 minutes, but I'm already 5 minutes over the amount of time that I should. You want me to do the rest of the story?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll do the rest of the story. So 3 years ago, my wife and I went to France, and I went to the Meuse-Argonne battlefield where my uncle had fought 100 years before. And some of the material that I inherited from the unit historians had the battle positions drawn on topographical maps. I know how to read a topographical map. So we went and we found this little town. I don't know how to speak French. So we kept asking people where Tally was. T-A-L-L-Y. We're looking for Tally, France. And it's so small that it's not on maps. And finally, I showed it to somebody. I said, I'm looking for this. And they went, oh, Tay. You're looking for Tay. Okay, I'm looking for Tay. So where's Tay, France? So now we figure out where it is. And we're able to go find the hilltop. And I walk into the wood line, and I find the trench that they had dug. Very obvious. You could see it running all along the inside of the wood line. And I don't think I stuck a picture in here, but that canteen cup is my uncle's canteen cup, and I apologize, I forgot to bring it this morning. Bought a bottle of French wine, toasted he and his comrades there, poured some of it out in the trench, drank some of it, and brought a couple of little pebbles home that I keep in that canteen cup. Then we went to visit one of his buddies that was killed there. Roy Wright was a mess sergeant. He was a master sergeant, but he was in charge of the mess tent. And he was a casualty of one of the first air raids, because a German biplane flew over the mess tent and dropped a bomb on it and killed 2 guys that were there. And one of them was buried in the Meuse-Argonne cemetery. So we got to go pay our respects to Roy. And that's the site where Roy was killed. It was a little ways away from the battle position that we had found earlier, but I found where that farm was and took a picture holding Roy's compass and his dog tags there. We found a bridge, took a picture of the same location over the Verdun River that or the Moose River, excuse me, that leads towards Verdun. And I'm passing those around. We've got some outstanding supporters here locally. Classic Chevrolet adopted us last year and again this year. We hope that that relationship stays for a long time. And if you know anybody else that we need to talk to, then please introduce me. My contact information in the back there are some of our vintage GallantFew coins, the gold ones. If you don't have one, take one, because we have new ones coming. So I don't need to hold on to the old ones anymore. And I've got some GallantFew carabiners back there. Feel free to take one or more, pass them along to some other folks. Anybody comments, questions?
It's amazing. It really is. Just on that Brigade V for just a moment. So Karl invited me into conversations, and we had a lady on from State Farm talking about Stillbridge. And does anybody in here not know what Stillbridge is? So,
It's that internship I talked about earlier.
yeah, it's the internship that Karl referenced, and it's pretty amazing because it didn't have anything like that when I got out. Thank you. So the Stillbridge organization, I looked it up, learned a little bit about it. We had a lady get on from California. Her name's Sarah McNamara, and she was a bit of an expert. So I connected her with our HR team, and we're actually going down a path to most likely have that kick in. When this all started, I knew of 6 veterans inside of our 2,000 people. We did a quick survey over the last year, and we have better than 115 veterans inside our organization, with 110 of them that have never said a word about being a veteran. So
For a lot of the reasons I talked about.
yep, absolutely, because it's not, especially right now, it's not air quotes cool to be a veteran. Right, there's somehow we're getting back to having a stigma associated with it, which is out of hand. But I think by getting this internship started, where there might be an opportunity for these older veterans to mentor these kids getting out, and anybody under 52, that's my age at this point, a kid, these kids getting out, giving them an opportunity to come in and kind of bring that all to life. That all came from one person who's from State Farm who referenced it, and then Sarah jumping in and kind of presenting to the group. So, and I've been a part of different associations for 30 years. I learned more in the last 12 months than I had in the previous 29. So there is a LinkedIn group for that Brigade V as well. So if you go out and look it up, just hit a connect and I can give you access, or others can. So appreciate it.
I handed him the mic because we're recording it and we got somebody on Zoom, so and that's where the sound is coming through. Any other comments, questions? Is there anything else on any slides that we need to cover?
That was it.
Well, thanks everybody for being here. I don't remember who the scheduled speaker is next month, but if you haven't spoken, or if you haven't spoken in a while and you want to come up here and do this, like once a year I try to talk, and last time I did, I told more of my personal story, but this time I thought the greater context, right? That some of you have been affiliated with me for a while, but you really haven't seen maybe the bigger picture and what's going on. So I wanted to go over that. But bring somebody else next month, and be safe. Everybody who's traveling, we'll see you. This is the meeting before the 4th of July. So a lot of you, the next time that I see you will be on the 4th of July. So I look forward to seeing y'all at the float. I'll probably be riding in a council car or something. So I volunteered to ride my bike, and I don't know if they're going to let me do that or not.
You couldn't show a politician doing actual.
I don't consider myself a politician, so. All right, thank you. Anybody else on Zoom that we need to say goodbye to, or?
No, just Phil.
Awesome. Phil, thanks for being there. Appreciate you dialing in. And this recording will be posted up online. All right, thank you for being here.